Welcome everybody. My name is Sam Irizarry, and today we are going to talk about how to make sense of chaos in a chaotic situation, all while we facilitate change in whole systems. So, as I began to take a look at the different ways that I could make a connection between whole system collaboration and the change methods, and frame it through the lens of the 8 essential elements. Meanwhile, it all had to be delivered in a Pecha Kucha style presentation, which up until this assignment started, I'd never heard of. I began to ask myself really just one simple question before I got started, and that was, why? Why is this process relevant to organization development? How will this make me a better change agent? And most importantly, how can I really help a client through a chaotic situation if I have trouble helping myself? So before I really found the answer, I realized I had to go through the process to understand the answer to some of these questions. When we talk about changing a whole system, what we really mean is helping an organization transform itself into a learning to function as a whole. Thus, as a change agent, we must have a sound set of tools and techniques that we use to help the systems we're working with. As a change agent, we must also draw from the basic elements to invent our own tools and techniques to help transform systems. Change methods are often tools that we draw from that can help us to facilitate transformations in systems. One thing they all have in common is that they follow the rules of whole system collaboration and change. But often these methods need plenty of pre-sorting to determine which ones are relevant to use in any given scenario. The initial step I took in my process began with me studying the characteristics of the 8 elements, which evolved from the 5 truths, and they all serve as cornerstones for developing methods. The 10 methods I had chosen because they all focus on collaboration and creativity. And I'm a very democratic person who enjoys learning about creative things. And as I took a look at the characteristics, I began to extract them onto an affinity diagram. An affinity diagram kind of looks like this, and it's a refined Japanese brainstorming technique that's used to help make sense of groups of ideas within a raw list. So you go through content, you pull out keywords and ideas, and you begin to categorize them. Now, me being the type of person that's not good with writing, I can't read my own handwriting, I found this awesome website called Trello, which allowed me to actually keep track of all this information in a more organized way that made sense for me. So I began by doing an affinity diagram of the affinity diagram articles to really get a base for what was important. And then I began to really examine each different method in full and begin to extract ideas and keywords and highlights and begin to map them onto my affinity diagram. And I realized I really just had a big list of seemingly useless content. So as my brain really started to make patterns and connections with the material, I decided it was the right time to move my content to something more visual, and at this point I wanted to make a mind map. So a mind map is a sort of diagram that's used to visually organize information around a single concept. So I began my mind map by putting the design elements at the center, and then I created extensions for each of the 8 elements. So I created an extension for purpose and mastery and system and invitation and technology, values, evidence, and experience. And I took these ideas and I began to expand on them and explore and find connections with the rest of the content that was on my affinity diagram. As I further broke down these elements into more meaningful segments, I began to expand on the ideas. In my brain, it really began to unlock avenues to fill in the areas that were not represented on my diagram. I started referencing things that weren't coming from the content or previous coursework and began to fill them in to fit my diagram. And in this moment, I realized that the possibilities were really endless and that this could be a really valuable tool moving forward. When you look at the map from a macro level, you can kind of see a vast array of information. I began to really see the depths to which I could detail my map and how it could serve as a sort of a flow chart or an actual map that can help me arrive to certain answers in the future in my career. When I started this process, it was really hard to understand that, I was too close to the situation. And I thought about a painting, a beautiful painting like the Mona Lisa. When you're very close to the Mona Lisa, it's blurry and it's hard to see its beauty until you step back. Once you step back, it begins to make sense. You begin to appreciate it. You get to see the deeper meaning. And as I began to see the mind map's beauty, my mind began to further connect the dots, make sense of all of the chaos. At the end, a change agent must be able to quickly recognize patterns and make connections with the information that the client is providing, even when that information seems overwhelming and difficult to understand. You must hang in there, follow through the process, and utilize the tools that you've helped develop. Going through the process for me was stormy, but as an organization development specialist, you must be able to weather the storm. If you want to be able to see the sunshine, that is. You have to find the patterns and organize the chaos in order to stabilize large and diverse systems. So how can we as consultants help clients make sense of chaos if we cannot make sense of it ourselves? Well, we must be able to truly transform systems. We have to understand to discover our own methods and processes for interpreting information. And most importantly, once we understand how to interpret that information, we must know how to communicate these discoveries to our clients in a manner that's helpful and makes sense to them. I looked at this project as a sort of a journey to self-discovery. The process taught me that it's important to develop your skills, understand and properly utilize tools and technology. It taught me to make connections and form patterns with complex information and develop a foundation for that information so that it can be continually developed and refined, adapted and changed, and it can serve as a map to success in future endeavors. And one day the storm is over. You won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about.